today if we thought it would just bring everything together and help the process. So, welcome. So, who's to lead?
Tēnā koutou katoa, ko Alan Roberthamahau. Thank you. Yes, I will open up. As you've mentioned, I have here with me Mr. Flack, who has also pre-circulated some corporate evidence. So I'll pass over to Mr. Flack to say some opening comments, and then I'll read through some key points from the document I've brought with me today.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Flack.
Kia ora koutou. You've received my evidence, and I would just like to just draw on the conclusions, first being that the airport is recognised as nationally and regionally significant infrastructure which should be protected from incompatible land uses such as structures which would penetrate an airport's obstacle limitation slopes. And secondly, that the airport is responsible for managing its noise effect responsibly to the best extent practicable, and the district plan should continue to provide reasonable levels of noise from aircraft operations and other airport activities. Thank you.
Thank you, Nick. So the document I've brought with me today, I've titled it Supplementary Planning Evidence, but in reality it's basically just a summary and a bit of an overview. It doesn't really constitute new or substantially different evidence from my evidence that I submitted earlier. I listened in to the opening statements this morning, and so maybe of value, rather than reading out this whole statement, I'll just highlight that the airport has sought two designations, or has two designations in the proposed district plan. The first relates to the airport's obstacle limitation surfaces, and as Mr. Flack has pointed out, those are not contested. I agree with the changes Ms. Lawson put forward in her Section 42A report, and I don't really address that further. With regard to the second designation, the airport purposes designation, there are what I see as three main areas of disagreement between myself and Ms. Lawson. Those relate to noise, whether or not other provisions of the designation need to be consistent with the underlying zone, and condition 21 insofar as it relates to stormwater management. I have heard the request for us to prepare a joint witness statement, and I'm more than happy to conference, and we'll work with Ms. Lawson to make sure we do that promptly. And with regard to those noise matters, I just wish to highlight the following points, which are at 2.4 on page 3 of my document here. Firstly, I rely on the expert noise evidence of Mr. Peakle, which was provided for the noise chapter hearing. I'm not aware of any alternative expert noise evidence that has been put before the panel. If there is some expert noise evidence available, I would be more than happy to consider that. Routine engine testing occurs infrequently at the airport, and by routine engine testing, I'm referring to kind of scheduled, planned maintenance activities. These are typically only undertaken by the general aviation community on much smaller aircraft than sort of the commercial aircraft undertaking commercial passenger flights, and those typically occur during daylight hours. My understanding is that under the operative plan, that type of planned testing is managed in accordance with the operative zone or noise chapter provisions, noise zone limits, and under the designation that's essentially proposed to be rolled forward. And based on the evidence of Mr. Peakle, there doesn't appear to be an issue with that approach to date. Similarly, the proposed limits for airport ground-based activities are the same as what would apply to airport activities under the noise chapter. So in my mind, it is reasonable and appropriate to apply whether or not the activity is provided for by the designation or the zone. It could be provided for by either, and therefore it's appropriate that those noise limits that apply are the same. For planning and practical reasons, there are planning and practical reasons for relying only on the outer control boundary to manage aircraft noise, and that's aircraft operations under the designation. And in this regard, I support the recommended track changes provided by Ms. Lawson in her pre-circulated opening statement to the extent that they reflect the changes I recommended in my evidence. And I also just wish to highlight that I'm not opposed to the management and monitoring of noise arising from aircraft operations. Rather, I seek to ensure the correct mechanisms are used for appropriate purposes without undue complexity. And with regard to the other two matters, I remain of the opinion that designations do not need to be consistent with the underlying zone, and requiring consistency with the underlying zone undermines the purpose of the airport purposes designation. And with regard to condition 21, the airport provides site-wide stormwater servicing in accordance with resource consents from the Regional Council. There are no reticulated services available at the airport, and as far as I'm aware, Napier City Council has no intention to extend stormwater servicing to the airport. In my view, effective stormwater management is essential to the operation of the airport, and the provision of stormwater services is clearly part of the airport's role of running the airport. I consider it important to exclude stormwater servicing from condition 21 to ensure that the airport can continue to provide this service under the designation. And I note that as the wording proposed for the designation is similar or the same to what was recommended and that I agreed to for the airport zone. I think it's appropriate to include different wording in the designation than the zone, because the airport is the requiring authority, is the only person exercising, I guess, their rights under the designation, and they're well aware part of the thing they're exercising is the ability to provide stormwater servicing, whereas under the zone, third parties would be undertaking development, and it's important that they're aware they have obligations to ensure their stormwater is managed appropriately. I'm happy to answer any questions from the hearing panel on these matters.
Okay, thank you. And before I turn to the panel for questions, just to make the panel aware and the officers that we have Mr. Stiles, the Council's noise advisor, is online at the moment listening, so he's available to answer any questions we may have. Any questions for the airport?
No questions from me. That's all very clear. Look forward to the joint witness statement between you and Ms. Lawson, which I'd like to see based on your Appendix A and your evidence, and then any areas of agreement and disagreement clearly outlined with reasons. And that'll be very helpful. Thank you.
Certainly.
Yeah, I was just going to bounce off a question that Commissioner Van Voorthausen asked of staff earlier, which is around the acoustic analysis for the basis of that 12 test annual cap that was being proposed by staff. And I was just thinking about it in terms of if the noise limits under NZS 6805 are met, is a strict cap required? Do you have a view on that? Or how often are we talking about to allow for the efficient and effective operations of the airport?
Nick, would you like to comment on how frequently they happen? And then I can perhaps turn to the kind of planning substance.
I don't know where the 12 comes from. So, and I would say that depending on the fleet of aircraft, or the composition of the fleet of aircraft in this airport, that 12 could happen in a month or 2 months quite easily, because they're unplanned. They are unplanned noise tests, and over the last 2 years, Air New Zealand has changed its fleet considerably from an ATR aircraft to a Q300 when they have no engineers on site. Air New Zealand has a vastly different reliability record on those aircraft, and it's seeing those aircraft fault quite regularly, requiring additional testing on site and potential noise testing. So if they continue to bring Q300s into our airport, that 12 could happen reasonably quickly, meaning that in future those aircraft will be sat on the tarmac, unable to be used, and would require aircraft to be relocated throughout New Zealand to be able to fly those passengers again. And it would disrupt schedules all over New Zealand.
Yeah, so from a planning perspective, looking at the Section 42A report, it seemed that Ms Lawson picked up the number 12 from the Nelson context. And as I highlight in my evidence at paragraphs 5.27 and the subsequent points, the Nelson context is quite different. They undertake maintenance and therefore they undertake regular scheduled engine testing. So the noise nature of that environment is completely different to the airport. In addition, I note that the actual wording of that limit of 12 is for essential unscheduled maintenance and engine testing that cannot comply with the above noise limits. So it's actually a buffer on top of an existing noise limit. So it's not, in my mind, it doesn't really appear to be a hard limit of you can only do essential engine testing 12 times. You can only do it 12 times when it doesn't comply with your noise limits. So in addition to being a very different noise environment, in my view, implementing a hard noise limit like that on the airport would just be very impractical. So as Nick has pointed out, you can't prepare for when an essential unplanned engine test is going to be required. As we gave evidence in earlier hearings, the airport has one of the highest rates of bird strike in New Zealand, and after a bird strike event, it's necessary for the aircraft to undertake an engine test. If they weren't allowed to take an engine test because it was the 13th engine test in a year, the alternative is that they're required to get a resource consent, and so that process can take many months. At best case scenario, it could take 20 days. So it's, just from a practical perspective, I just think the costs significantly outweigh the benefit, especially as Nick's just pointed out that a delay to a scheduled passenger aircraft has knock-on effects for other scheduled flights across the North Island or even New Zealand, resulting in significant economic, social and cultural costs.
And just to provide some context around the numbers, yesterday there were three aircraft that went what they call technical, which is a delay or cancellation, meaning that aircraft would have had to have an unplanned engine test 3 yesterday.
Thank you, that's really helpful.
On that point, just a question. You used the phrase routine engine testing in your summary statement, Ms Rowbotham. Is that the same as what we're talking about as unplanned engine testing, or is there a difference?
In my mind, there's a difference. So in the Hawke's Bay Airport context, my understanding is that what I've referred to as routine is typically only undertaken by the general aviation community, and that would typically happen during the daytime in accordance with what I've referred to under the designation as airport ground-based activities. So essentially it would occur in accordance with the land-based or the zone-based noise limits, whereas essential unplanned engine testing could be undertaken by the larger planes, such as the commercial passenger flights, and therefore have noise effects that may not comply with the land-based noise limits. It may be occurring overnight or just whenever it's required.
Are you fairly familiar with the Nelson Airport situation?
My understanding of the Nelson Airport is purely based on what I found in the district plan and what I found online with their noise management plan. In terms of the operations, that was informed by conversations with Mr. Flack.
I'm just thinking of the enforceability issue you've raised about getting consent. It would almost be in retrospective if once you've done the engine testing and then you get consent for it. But the other way around too, isn't it? Like with Nelson too, how do they know when they've reached that magical 12 limit? How does that work exactly?
The operational difference in Nelson is that they have a aircraft maintenance hangar on site. And so the majority of their tests will be
Inside
will be
the building.
planned and will be inside their planned process. Whereas what Alan's talking about is that you have a road strike and then you immediately need to do an engine test. If we're at 12, then there's no more, and it would sit on the ground essentially until we got a consent.
And we're talking more about the Air New Zealand type planes, not the general type. Okay, and would every engine testing raise or create the same amount of noise? As if you know you're testing a certain engine type, you'll know you'll be above a certain noise limit. Is that how it works?
Typically,
Yeah.
So it'll be tested in a similar location with the same kind of aircraft doing a similar kind of run-up. So
Okay.
whether that's 80% power or full power.
And not to put words in your mouth, but the Nelson example where they have the 12 events above the noise limits, is that what you're suggesting for Napier, or?
No, I'm suggesting that there be no limit. So one of the reasons I suggest that is when I was sort of thinking through what the alternatives would be and thinking, well, if there's a limit and then you need a resource consent, as you've pointed out, those resource consents would probably always need to be retrospective. So I was thinking, oh, well, then would you aim to try and make some sort of prediction about what a reasonable number was and then include that, kind of apply for a resource consent that provided for that certain limit. And then I was just thinking, well, that's the whole point of the designation. The point of the designation is to provide for the airport to undertake the activities it needs to do and to facilitate those. So kind of going down the rabbit hole, I guess, of alternative consenting pathways or options, really I came back to, from my perspective, the most pragmatic option is the designation with no specific limit on unplanned or essential unplanned engine testing.
So each of these engine testing, and I'm thinking the Air New Zealand type, how long would it go on for? How would a West Shore resident know that, they're testing an engine at the moment?
That's a really good question. There are a lot of specifics on what time of day, what the wind direction is, how the length of time that the aircraft is. Sometimes we should may, but probably in most cases they wouldn't if it's done in a location at the west of our runway facilities. They may not.
Behind the buildings, basically. All right.
I think another matter to consider is what is, I guess, in some ways the risk or the likelihood of adverse effects arising from this. And as far as I'm aware, to date, the airport hasn't received any complaints about the engine testing. Therefore, there's also a question there's also a question in my mind of proportionality and whether or not this is actually something we really need to be concerned about. And at least as far as I'm aware, there's no evidence to say that this is a significant issue. Mr. Peakel's evidence or the acoustic advice that was with the NOR indicates that this isn't an area of issue. It occurs infrequently. There are no complaints that we're aware of. So it doesn't necessarily need a detailed response.
Okay. And I suppose it also relates to the type of engines of the types of planes that use Napier or Hawke's Bay Airport. I mean, it would be totally different kettle of fish if it was Boeing 777 or something. You know, they're coming in, it would be quite different for that. But there's no expectations of anything, jet services commencing or anything like that. So we're basically dealing with what currently happens generally, maybe with some growth for the foreseeable future.
That's my understanding, yes.
Okay. Any questions?
And just one further issue, and correct me if I'm wrong, but our recommendations on this go through back to the airport authority anyway, as requiring authority, not to the council, don't they?
Correct.
So you have the ultimate say in any case.
Yes. Correct.
Just confirming that's the case.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? No, thank you very much for that. That was very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Now, Mr. Kay has withdrawn. He is not looking to be heard today. So our next submitter is planned to be at 2:30. Manu Ahuriri?
They should be a little bit earlier.
It should be a little bit earlier. Okay. Well, we might take some time to set up because they have got a team that needs setting up. So we'll adjourn the hearing until 2 o'clock, shall we say?
Sure.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
As I sort of said, Sarah, I think we pretty much have an agreed position on matters, on the objectives and policies and the wording, etc. We just find ourselves in the position to discuss or have discussion around subdivision and new buildings in that zone and the site-specific provision for a supermarket. I'm not sure if the committee are aware, but there is an approved resource consent for the site as well. I don't know if that's been passed through to you. I do have a copy of that here, and a master plan that accompanied that, which is available as well if that's wanted.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
So, Sarah, as I say, we're pretty much available for questions in relation to the points you have. I see Mr. Falconer is up here. It says Mr. Stiles, but
Yeah, Mr. Stiles was attending virtually for the previous matter primarily, so. Okay.
so if you've got questions of either myself or Mr. Evers or Mr. Falconer, I don't know how you'd like to start it. Sorry, I'm just sort of at the point with legal submissions been done previously, so or maybe we can do those.
Well, should we work our way through the sites? I'm just trying to think of the best way to handle, because we have, as I said, read the pre-circulated evidence, and there's been quite a bit of agreement, I think, from a lot of things, and you just listed the matters in contention still. I'm just thinking how best we can proceed to address those matters.
Well, I think we just do them. Perhaps the activity status one is one that's, that's probably planning related.
Road today, aren't we?
Yeah. Commissioner Van Volthousen's just clarified. We are just focusing on Wharerangi Road today.
Correct, sorry, yes,
well, the other
sorry.
ones are
Yeah,
for next.
for tomorrow or next day.
Yeah.
Yep.
Straight Wharerangi Development, Dev 2.
Yeah.
Yep. Okay.
So, yeah, as I say, the difference around the subdivision new buildings was, Mana's submission was that basically that it should be a controlled activity for new buildings and subdivision that comply with standards and restricted discretionary otherwise. The reasons around that, or the rationale behind that, was the current, I think if I read correctly, the officer had stated that the council's position would be it'd be more measurable against the structure plan. However, when you look at the structure plan, there's no, it lacks any specific detail that would allow us to do that. So if you looked at some of the assessment criteria, etc., there was no real connection there, is how we saw it. So the subdivision, if it was controlled, would match what I believe is coming through with the stream 2. I think there was a change there from memory.
The subdivision
Correct.
component.
Yeah. So I think they added in, there was a missing word for Wharerangi development area, or Wharerangi Road, took out Park Island, and put that in there. So that would just marry up there in terms of control. And then in terms of assessment criteria, it sort of, it refers you to the structure plan and roading layouts, etc., but there are none on the structure plan. And we've since subsequently got a approved resource consent now in place as well, which shows roads and...
Is that for the entire site? Sorry to interrupt.
Yes,
Yeah. Okay.
Full master plan for the whole site.
Yeah.
And the approval that creates super lots, as well as the commercial zone and medium density and the reserves. So it just makes sense to us if that was coordinated.
Yeah. Questions?
Yep. Some questions?
Yeah, look, just stepping through the various documents, I'd like you to convey to Mr Gardner Hopkins certainly my appreciation for his legal submissions. I've found them to be very helpful and clear, and particularly enjoyed the diagrams that he had in there, which I found informative. So if you could relay that on to Mr Gardner Hopkins for me, I'd appreciate that.
Okay.
Don't have any questions for Mr Falconer. Just the only question arising for me from the traffic evidence, just confirming the local centre zone, understand their desires to have a supermarket in there. Just a supermarket, or would it be a supermarket plus some associated little separate retail?
Well, our original assessment included both a supermarket and ancillary retail. Our evidence that we prepared for this hearing was assessing just the supermarket.
Right,
So
okay. No, I just wanted to confirm.
either way, with our detailed modelling analysis, the surrounding road network can cope with the traffic.
Sure. Yeah, understood that. So I just wanted, yeah, so that was my understanding. So now it's just being promoted as a supermarket without ancillary retail. That's the current proposal.
Yeah, that's what we were asked to prepare evidence on,
Yeah.
yes. But as Mr Holder's spoken to previously, the resource consent has quite a larger area, which we were working to previously, and that's what our original traffic assessment is.
Sure,
reviewed.
understood. Yep. Don't have any questions for Mr Heath on economics. That was straightforward. And Mr Holder, just one question for you. If we look at DEV2S1, standard one,
Yes.
and I think as notified, it's restricted discretionary, defaulting to discretionary. You're asking for it to be controlled, defaulting to RDIS.
Correct, yes.
So if we were to accept that, would the current matters of discretion become matters of control?
Yes, they are. Yes, they. Well, this
not-
is where it gets difficult, sir, because you've got to measure them against things like that weren't on a structure plan as such. So that's sort of where I had some difficulty in that, because we've got a resource consent that shows a layout of roads, etc. So location and design of road network.
Yes.
There is none on the structure plan.
Right.
So
So maybe, I think last time you appeared before us, we gave you some homework and you diligently did that homework for us, which was good.
it was a day late, sir, but yes, yes.
Oh, no, that was fine. It was very helpful. So could you do the same here? Just to give some thought, if we were to go along with the relief sought to make the activity status control defaulting to RDIS, what would the actual wording be? Because I don't think it's not as simple as just crossing out restricted discretionary and writing controlled, because then there have to be matters of control, and if it defaults to RDIS, there have to be matters of discretion. So it's a little bit more complicated than just changing the name, the titles of the rules.
No, I
So
accept that,
don't
sir.
try and do that on the hoof, because
Yes.
you'll need to think about it, but talk to your people and come back with some wording.
Certainly.
Yeah, that would be good. And that was the only question I had.
Just a question around, you've shown us the sort of the master plan as it is now
Yes.
through that consent process. You're not proposing that that be introduced to replace the so-called structure plan in this, in the notified plan under appendix, whatever it is, 10?
There's a, well, probably not at this stage, because there's a slight variation going through on that at the moment in terms of how the lots change around, but it would make, that's currently going through council now, but if it wasn't, I'd say yes, probably, because that's got the road spines, etc. Though I don't believe they're changing too much on what we've currently buried. So, but
Because you were talking in your evidence in chief that unless the map is updated accordingly, and I was just questioning whether you had intended that map to be updated through the consented plan.
I had, Sarah, yeah, I'd obviously thought about it. I was just thinking then now it would make sense, but no, there's a variation going through.
Right.
Just think I haven't got that in front of me, so I need to probably check that. But I can perhaps do that as part of that homework if you like,
Yeah.
and see if there's any changes between this master plan approved and the resource consent and the subsequent variation.
Yeah.
Whether that would help, because I think there's been some time spent around that layout with council staff, around servicing, roading access, particularly off Westminster Ave, and where the park layouts and access to those layouts should be. So it would make sense for us to at least put those cards on the table for consideration again.
Yep.
Happy to work with council staff on that.
Okay. How far away is this variation, you think? Is it?
It should be out any time. There was just some changes on connections through to the reserve, etc. So I'd say it'd be a week or so, I would imagine.
Okay.
All going well.
Well,
We've answered all the questions and the information. It's just on
Okay.
processing now of council to get it out.
Because, I mean, you're quite right, the Appendix 10 doesn't show a master plan. It's a close-up zoning map, basically. Doesn't help at all. So, I mean, the other option would be not to have any sort of plan as such, and yeah, there's issues around that.
Yeah, I think it just, the master plan gives some more surety to council, I guess, as well as to the future.
Okay. Okay.
Yep.
And I was going to ask you about the size of the local centre zone
Yes.
that's shown. Does that equate to the one that's in the notified thing? There's no change to that.
Master plan here, the future commercial on here is 1.15 hectares, 1.51.
Right. And is that the same as the notified area? Do you know the top of your head?
I believe it's the same, but yeah, I did.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no measure on the one that's notified.
And the area of open space zone that's shown on the so-called structure plan, because it is a zone, would that change because of that consented plan? Would it have to change? I.e., we're looking at a rezoning as well as dealing with the master plan issue.
This one here's got open space on it and connections through to the other open space, so I think that would be covered.
Okay, that's good.
There's a large stormwater detention area required by council, which is shown as an open, like
All right,
a
yeah.
detention park slash.
Yeah, you can see it there at the top left corner, is there?
Yeah, that's the one that's shown on the notified version
Correct, yes.
of it.
Just doesn't have this bit of the extra
No, okay.
that council requiring.
Is the submission to have that rezoned as well? Is that what you're saying, to open space? Or not?
No,
I mean, I don't think it has to be,
no, I don't
in the
believe it
subdivision
is.
process and things.
I don't believe it is.
Okay, keep it simple.
Yeah. It's part of our process.
Just one comment in regards to the conversation you're having around putting together some matters of control. One of the things I was thinking about is that if you're moving into matters of control, you'll need to think around staging and timing as well, managing the sequence of development relative to the infrastructure needs, which is something that's probably not already a matter of discretion.
Yes, no, that makes sense. And I can probably tie that into the consent because it's a staged consent as well. So we've got some staging phases there as well, how that might work and try to tie it on.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you. More a thought than anything. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Good thought. Okay, thank you. I don't think we have any more questions on that matter.
No, maybe just a thought. Mr. Holder, do you think, I mean, we've been talking about DV2 S1A, the standard. Do you think on the basis of the consented plan that you've been talking to us about, is there any need to revisit the DV2 assessment criteria?
Yes, probably. That,
Yeah.
I think we'd probably look at that
As well.
That makes sense.
Yeah, I think it probably would make sense.
Yeah, it would make sense that from say, unless that becomes part of the AP10's replaced.
Yeah. Or maybe if you could just liaise, is it Miss Lawson? You either, talk with Miss Lawson, maybe if the two of you work together,
Yes.
and in light of the consented development and the more detailed plan, maybe consider not only some rewording for DV to S1A, but also have a look at the assessment criteria. They may need a bit of a tickle up, I don't know, so I haven't really turned my mind to it. And then, of course, there's the issue of scope, but then we always have our clause 10.2b to rely on of the first schedule in terms of consequential amendments. So have a look at it and just see what's sensible and come back to us with some agreed wording.
Timing for that, Sue?
What's the timing for reply reports
Thursday.
for the officers? Blair, what's, for this hearing stream, what's your target date for reply reports?
I don't think we've discussed it, but I think we would.
We usually aim to have it a couple of weeks in advance of the
Deliberations.
preliminary deliberations. So that would be, if we're going to have them by the 29th of July, it will be a couple of weeks before that.
So 2 weeks from now to do that work with the, Mr Holder and Ms Lawson, as we say within 2 weeks, can that work be done?
Yeah.
Yeah, that'd be good. And sooner the better, but yeah, 2 weeks at the most. Easy.
Okay.
Yep.
Yeah, good. Okay, thank you. We don't have any more
Thank you.
questions, but we'll see you again soon.
And if you could leave copies of the consent, yeah, that'd be
consent
great.
plan.
Wednesday, I guess. See you Wednesday.
Wednesday, yep.
I think Mr Gardner Hopkins might be available.
Is it his eye or his shoulder that's got him this time?
I'm not sure on this one.
It was a number of
I think
things,
it's
wasn't it?
both, combination.
Right.
So hopefully Wednesday we'll see.
Well, thank you. Thank you for attending. Thank you. Now, we do have one more submitter who we've been unable to confirm she's coming.
Scheduled for 3 o'clock. So we have to wait till 3 o'clock,
Was it 3? Oh,
don't we?
yeah, 3 o'clock. Okay, well, we'll adjourn the hearing until 3 o'clock, if not earlier, if we get our submitter in earlier. Okay,
Yeah,
thank you.
good.
Hello. Hearing stream 5 is concluded for the day. Our last submitter hasn't appeared today, so we will formally end this hearing stream. Tomorrow and Wednesday, hearing stream 6 will occur on various rezoning requests around the city. So with that, we'll end hearing stream 5. Thank you.